Attila from the third coat. So just want to show you a door that I've just done. Well, not just now, but a few days ago. And the reason I'm just trying to give you some advice is because I have found that this is probably the most challenging, like one of the most challenging jobs that are around in house painting, and that is painting a flat door using water-based enamel. Like in this case we're talking about Dulux Aquanamel, but anything equivalent. And I mean, you may have seen some of my other videos about this paint, and I don't mind using it. I actually like it, and most of the time I do alright with it. It's this one particular situation that is the trickiest, and I have always had to do a bit of trial and error, and just trying to compromise, and I've often sort of felt like I wasn't quite getting the kind of finish that I was after, but I just but generally the clients have been alright. I know that there's been a couple of clients who I've done a bit of this sort of stuff, painting flat doors, in the recent couple of years, and I know that they were not 100% impressed, and I tried to sort of redo it and try to make it better, and probably even made it worse. But the problem is that like you're trying to get a reasonably smooth finish, so you're not going to use some sort of like a roller like what you see on a wall. You're not going to use a 10, 11, 12 mil roller nap, because that would just be a bit too textured for a glossy finish on a door. So we're trying to use, I've always sort of in the past always tried to use 4mm nap, because that was the most sort of frequent. That's what I saw a lot of in paint shops, and they used to make the mohair rollers. They still do, but nowadays there's a bit more of microfiber rollers around. The same nap, 4mm in general. That's what they seem to recommend. Well, in paint shops and roller manufacturers, they seem to like that size, 4mm nap. And just recently I've stumbled onto a 5mm microfiber roller. I still like to use, I mean, even with this one I have sort of experimented a bit, tried to go back and forth. Sometimes I had like a period when I used just a normal wide big roller, like 270mm or maybe 230mm, and tried to paint the whole door quickly. It never really worked, because there was always going to be, you were always going to have to dip. You can't, I've never been able to paint like roll a flat door with one dip of a 4mm roller, even like 270mm or whatever. Just haven't been able to do it, and as a result, you do the top half of the door, you sort of lay it off, and then do the bottom half. There's going to be a section in between, so you're still going to have to do a long lay off, like back roll, for the whole length of the door. And by the time you do that, the top section that you did a while ago is already going to be sort of tacky, because that's the thing with this stuff. Water-based enamel dries very quickly, and I don't like to thin any paint out there. I don't care about, well, I know that that's probably the easiest way to make it smooth, but that's not my priority really. My priority is to make it last, and make sure it's got the structural integrity that the manufacturer intended. So I don't want to break that up just to make the surface look smooth. So I've never tried. I always try to avoid thinning the paint, and most of the time that means that it's very difficult to get a smooth finish with a 4mm roller. The only exception I have had was, and in fact it wasn't even with water-based enamel, but it was with gloss weather shield, and it was probably in the middle of the winter, like 12 degrees or something, reasonably humid, and I did a door that turned out almost as if it had been sprayed. It was beautiful, very smooth, but that was a dark colour. I think Dulux Monument it was, and made out of extra bright base with a lot of tint in it. And that's something you should know. The more tint you have in paint, the slower it will dry. So all that tint in the Monument colour, in the Monument Weather Shield, it really slowed down its drying, and especially in the middle of the winter, it just had a lot of time. I had a lot of time to work with it, keep a wet edge, and it had a lot of time to flow out as well. So it actually really looked pretty much like a sprayed finish. It was a beautiful finish. No roller marks at all. I mean, there was stipple, stipple that looked like a spray finish. I can't really explain. It looked much nicer than that. But you can only do that with paint that has a lot of tint in it, and conversely, that paint is never going to be very durable. Okay, that's a trade-off. The more tint you have in paint, the slower it dries, and the less durable it will be. That's the trade-off, and I don't like that trade-off. I like to make my paint jobs last, and that's why I actually recommend light colours to my clients. So that means not much tint in the paint compared to some of the really bright dark colours out there. So anyway, with white or light colours, then so 4mm tends to be a bit short, even in cold weather, and so I've managed to find some 5mm rollers, and that's what I've used here, and that's probably the best I've done with white paint. Best aquanamel finish I've done with white paint on flat doors, and it's reasonably consistent. I don't know how well you can see it. Probably not very well at all, but it's a pretty good finish anyway. This is only semi-gloss, and gloss would actually dry slower, so it would probably look even better. But so the way I do it, and that's how I've always tried to do. But even with 4mm, even this method doesn't really work, because it just dry. The paint goes on too thin and it dries too quickly. Just that 1mm difference makes a hell of difference in terms of drying times. So that 1 extra millimeter, it might not be the I don't know, like, what's the trade-off? It might be the stipple might be a little bit higher or something. I don't know, but it still looks pretty good and consistent, and that's pretty much all you can expect from an aquanamel finish on a flat door consistency, right? Because You're never going to get it, you know, very smooth and no stipples. You're never going to have no stipples with a roller. That's not going to happen. So what you want is just consistency in the stipples. And so the way I do it, and the way I've always tried to do, but sometimes it hasn't quite worked out, mostly because of the 4mm rollers that I've tried to use. But I've always tried to use, most of the time, tried to use a smaller roller. I don't know, this one might be a 150mm or something. I've even tried to use 100mm rollers. You know, like, yeah, that sort of size or something. But this one works better because you can put a bit more paint on it, not just because of the longer nap, but also because of the wider, like the bigger width. It allows you to sort of to go back over the same spot, and you don't necessarily have to do a much wider sort of, you know, like a much wider area than you would with a smaller roller. It just gives you a better chance to keep a wet edge. That's what I feel anyway. So I go, and with this one, you know, even this, sometimes I've tried to go downwards, which just doesn't work because you don't have enough time. But across the door, that's what I've found that it works the best. So you start at the top and, you know, put it on, maybe, you know, so I don't know, like depending on how much paint you can put on the roller, you will sort of be able to tell how wide you need to go with every dip, and then just back roll, and go on with the second dip, and go back over the previous paint just a bit, and then sort of lay it off. And with this one, I think it's important that when you lay off or back roll, you don't actually go from the new paint towards the old, right? It's actually important, I feel, that once you put on the new paint, right, you haven't quite laid it off yet, but you made it reasonably, sort of spread it out reasonably well. And when you want to back roll it, normally, you know, your first instinct would be to sort of start back rolling from the new paint upwards towards the existing old paint, right? But that also takes away a bit of time from the wet edge, you know. So it makes more sense to back roll, continuing from the previous old, what you already back rolled, continuing from there on downwards with the new paint, right? And then do the same, add another dip, and obviously remove the hardware. I've already reinstalled this. So, you know, this is an important point, especially with this sort of paint. You want to maximize your wet edge. You got to make sure that when you back roll, you start at the paint at the area that you have already finished back rolling. Okay, don't start down there and start back rolling and go back upward towards the old paint, because that's already gonna be dryish, sort of semi-dry. So you give yourself the best chance of keeping a wet edge, and you do that first by you know, back rolling, starting your back roll from the already back rolled areas, and then second by using a little bit longer nap, which would be 5mm instead of 4mm. You know, try this and I guarantee that it will make a difference. And you know, if you have tried it before with 4mm rollers, I think compared to that you will be much happier with this. Alright, I hope it helps, and let me know if you know, if you've given it a try and what you think. Have a good one. Bye.